The oak floor of Vance Elite Martial Arts gleamed under cold neon. 30 students and parents stood in a ring, phones raised. Damon Vance, black belt, trimmed in gold, tossed a stack of $5,000 onto the mat and pointed at the man in faded flannel by the door. $5,000 says you don't last 30 seconds on my floor. Easy money. The crowd laughed. Police Chief Claire Whitman stood at the far corner, not stepping in, not yet. Nathan Cole looked down at the money. He didn't speak. He nodded once. Damon had no idea who he'd challenged. 3 days earlier, the Wilmington harbor smelled of diesel and salt and old rope. Nathan Cole stood inside a metal-roofed shop on Pier 4, his hands black with engine grease, leaning over the gutted housing of an outboard motor. A coworker called something across the bay. Nathan answered with a half nod and a quiet word and kept working. He had been at the yard for almost 2 years. The men there liked him. None of them could have told you a single fact about his life before Wilmington. At 3:20, he washed his hands at the slop sink, pulled on a faded flannel, and drove the gravel road to Roland Elementary. Lily climbed into the truck with her backpack on one shoulder, her hair half out of its braid. He noticed the bruise before she set the bag down. A soft greenish mark across the inside of her wrist, the kind that took at least 2 days to bloom. He did not ask. He drove. Halfway home, she said it without looking at him. "Dad, I want to learn how to never be scared again." He kept his eyes on the road. After a long moment, he said, "Okay." That night he sat on the porch and watched the harbor lights bend against the water. Inside the house, on the kitchen shelf, the framed photograph of Sarah caught the lamp glow. 3 years gone. He had not moved the picture. He had not moved much of anything. He had repainted the porch the year she died. He had not painted it since. The salt air had taken most of the gloss back. He preferred it that way. The house remembered her in its bones the way he did. The next morning he took Lily to Vance Elite Martial Arts. Damon Vance met them at the front desk with a salesman's smile that did not reach his eyes. He looked Nathan over worn boots, soft jacket, hands that knew labor, and slotted him into a category he had used 100 times. Nobody. He quoted the tuition at twice the listed rate, and added, "Father probably needs time to arrange the finances." Nathan opened his wallet and counted the bills onto the counter, one by one. He did not argue. During the trial class, Damon shoved Lily off balance twice. The second time, she went down on one knee. Nathan stood behind the observation glass, jaw set, hands flat at his sides. He did not move. Another mother beside him whispered, "He's always like that. But his kids win state, so everybody puts up with it." When the class ended, Damon clapped Nathan on the shoulder. "If it feels too rough, there's a daycare across the street." A few students near the door laughed. Nathan thanked Damon and walked his daughter out. That same morning, Claire Whitman crossed the dojo lobby on her way out. A complaint had come into her office 2 weeks earlier from the family of a 13-year-old who had left the school with a sprained collarbone. She was not there in uniform. She was there to look. She saw Nathan from across the room. Not the flannel, the way his eyes mapped the corners. 4 seconds. Exits, sightlines, distance to his child. She wrote in her notebook, "Man at dojo, reads the room in 4 seconds, checks exits, not normal." That night, Nathan cleaned a scrape on Lily's knee at the kitchen table. The light was warm. He smoothed a small bandage over the cut and said, "I promise you, you're never going to have to be scared of anyone. Ever." She fell asleep against his shoulder. On the table behind them, an unopened envelope from the Department of the Navy. He was not ready to read it yet. The next morning, Nathan dropped Lily at the dojo half an hour early, so she would not have to walk in alone. He crossed the street to the coffee shop on the corner, took the booth by the window, and ordered black. Marcus Reed came through the door at 9:10. The two men saw each other from 20 feet away. Marcus's right hand twitched up out of habit, the start of a salute, half a lifetime of muscle memory, and Nathan gave the smallest shake of his head. The hand dropped. Marcus walked over and slid into the booth like a man sitting down with an old neighbor. "You good, sir?" "Don't call me that here." "Yes." "Cole." Marcus looked out at the dojo across the street. "Heard the punk's giving you trouble. He's a guy who likes to talk." "Sir, one phone call to Lejeune, and—" "No." Nathan set his cup down. "My daughter doesn't need to know her father is anyone other than her father." Marcus held his eyes for a long second. Then he nodded. He took a long breath in and a longer breath out. He understood the shape of the job. He had spent 20 years understanding the shape of the job. He drained his coffee. 2 booths back, Claire Whitman had been listening to a deputy's report through her earpiece. She lifted her coffee, paused, and did not lift it any further. The cup stayed in the air for a count of 3. She had heard 2 words from Marcus's mouth, low and clear, Lieutenant Commandé. She did not turn her head. When Nathan stood up to collect his daughter, he glanced across the room and met her eyes. The first real look between them. 3 seconds. She gave him a small, polite nod. He returned it. Something was exchanged that neither of them could have named yet. Inside the dojo, Damon noticed something he could not place. Lily was standing in a position he had not taught her. Feet offset, weight low, hands relaxed and ready. He stopped the line and crouched in front of her. "Where did you learn that, princess?" "My dad showed me last night." Damon looked toward the observation window. It was empty. Nathan had stepped down to the lobby for a bottle of water. Damon filed it away. In the back of his mind, a question had started turning. He had never been wrong about a fight before. So what did the boat mechanic know? That evening, Claire pulled into her driveway, climbed the steps, and went straight to her laptop. She typed Nathan Cole, Wilmington into the police database. The civilian record came back clean, too clean. No parking tickets, no medical history, no credit pulls. A man who had moved into a coastal town 2 years ago and left almost no trace. She typed Nathan Cole, United States Navy. The screen blinked once. A red banner came up, classified. Contact NCS for access. Claire leaned back in her chair and stared at it for a long time. She read the banner 3 times, as if the screen might soften under the light. It did not. She rested her hand on the closed laptop and felt her own pulse against the metal. In 10 years of policing, she had pulled exactly 2 records that came back like this. Both had been wars no one ever talked about in public. She shut the lid. Across town, in an office on the 2nd floor of Vance Construction, Damon Vance poured 2 fingers of whiskey for his father. Councilman Harold Vance accepted the glass and waited. "There's a man in town I don't like," Damon said. "I want him gone." Harold smiled. "Son, you know I always work it out." He clinked his glass against his son's. The fight had started, and only one person in all of Wilmington understood who was actually being hunted. Sunday. The annual Harbor Charity Carnival filled the Wilmington town square with paper banners, food trucks, and the smell of fried dough. The school district was raising money for new playground equipment. Damon Vance had a booth set up at the north end of the square, where he was breaking pine boards over his knee for a small audience of children. Nathan took Lily through the line at the cotton candy truck and bought her a cone the size of her head. She found her friend Bea at one of the picnic tables under the trees. Bea's mother, an old neighbor of Nathan's, waved him off with an easy smile and a, "Go, I've got her, take a breath." Nathan walked back toward the square. Damon spotted him from across the crowd. The flannel, the slouch, the audience he already had. He smiled like a man who had just been handed a gift. Folks, Damon's voice rose above the noise. "We've got one of our local parents here. Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, come on up. We're inviting every father in town to step on the mat today." All in good fun. The crowd clapped, half curious. Nathan shook his head once, polite. Damon pushed harder. "Or, are you afraid of losing face in front of the whole town?" Nathan glanced toward the picnic tables. Lily was laughing with Bea, cotton candy on her cheek, not looking. He stepped onto the demonstration mat. Damon attacked fast, a low kick, then a tight combination off the hands. Nathan did not punch back. He moved his weight by inches, let each strike slide past the line of his body. To anyone watching, it looked like Damon was driving him around the mat. To anyone watching closely, no clean shot had landed. After 30 seconds, Nathan raised both hands. He shook his head and conceded. Damon raised his arms to the cheering crowd. A few parents at the back of the gathering turned away and looked at their shoes. Claire stood at the edge of the square in plain clothes, arms crossed, watching. She had seen Nathan read every strike a half beat before it left Damon's body. The reaction time alone was wrong. It did not belong in the same room as a boat mechanic. Nathan returned to the picnic table. Lily handed him the last bite of her cotton candy. "Where did you go, Dad?" "To get water." She believed him. That evening, Claire drove to the boatyard. She had invented a pretext, a stolen toolbox report from a neighboring shop. Nathan was locking the side door when she pulled in. He turned, surprised, then not surprised. "Chief, Mr. Cole." They stood 3 feet apart. The silences between sentences were longer than the sentences. "You didn't fight back," she said. "Nothing to prove. Sometimes there is." He held her gaze a beat longer than necessary. She felt it. So did he. She got back in her cruiser. As she drove away, Nathan stood and watched her taillights until they turned the corner. Inside the car, Claire's hands tightened on the wheel. She had not asked a single question about the stolen toolbox. She had not even invented a follow-up. She had stood 3 feet from a man she barely knew and let the silence say things her badge did not give her permission to say. She rolled the window down for air and did not roll it up again until she reached town. Late that night, Damon uploaded the clip to the dojo's social channels with the caption, "Local dad gets a lesson. Easy money inbound." A parent left an anonymous comment, "You shouldn't have touched that guy. I'm telling you." Damon deleted it. At home, Nathan finally opened the envelope from the Navy. Inside, a Silver Star citation and an RSVP card for a ceremony in Norfolk. He folded it in half and placed it in the bottom drawer of the desk. The clip moved through Wilmington in 3 days the way weather moves through a small town. By Wednesday, men at the boatyard who had nodded to Nathan for 2 years were not making eye contact. By Thursday, a hardware clerk gave him his change without looking up. The deli woman who had always slipped Lily a free pickle slice handed Nathan his sandwich at arm's length, the way a person hands something to a stranger. A teenage cashier at the market watched him put the eggs on the belt and then watched him walk away. Nothing said. Everything said. On Friday morning, an anonymous complaint landed on Claire's desk. It accused Nathan Cole of harassment of a juvenile student at Vance Elite Martial Arts. It alleged that he had been seen watching through the observation window in a manner causing distress. It was filed through a law firm Claire recognized immediately. The same firm that had handled 3 of the council's no-bid contracts. She read it once. She set it down. Her desk phone rang 10 minutes later. Councilman Harold Vance, warm as cider. He hoped the chief understood the seriousness of any allegation involving children. He encouraged her to move quickly to protect the trust the town had placed in her office. Then, almost as an afterthought, "By the way, the department's quarterly budget comes up before the council next month." She put the phone down and looked out her window at the line of the harbor. She drove to the boatyard at noon. Nathan was outside, hosing salt off a winch. He looked up, dried his hands on a rag, and waited. She held the complaint out without speaking. He read it. His face did not change. "You have your job," he said. "I don't want you to have to choose. I already chose." Something in his eyes softened. It was not gratitude. It was a slow recognition of who she was choosing to be. Marcus Reed arrived at the yard 10 minutes later. He pulled Nathan into the lee of the building and lowered his voice. "Sir, it's time. One call." "No, sir. They want me to swing publicly. If I make that call, I've already lost." Marcus exhaled hard through his nose. He did not argue. He never argued past the line. That night, after Lily was asleep, Nathan sat alone at the kitchen table. He sat for a long time. He thought about what he would say to her over breakfast. He did not have to. In the morning, sitting in her pajamas with cereal in front of her, Lily said it first. "Dad, I don't want to go to the dojo anymore. I want to learn somewhere else." He smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "Okay." It was the quietest moment of the week. Damon heard about the withdrawal by lunchtime. He drove to Nathan's house an hour after Lily had left for school. He stood outside the picket fence and offered loudly to refund every penny if Mr. Cole would publicly apologize for the implication of favoritism, a media trap. Nathan closed the front door. Damon shouted at the closed door. $5,000, Cole. You and me, my floor. Saturday. You win, I close the doors. I win, you leave Wilmington. A neighbor across the street was already recording. By evening, the new clip was everywhere in town. The whole of Wilmington was waiting for the boat mechanic to answer. Claire did not sleep. At 7 the next morning, she drove to the VA office at the south end of town. She asked, at the front desk, to speak with Marcus Reed. She gave a name from an old veteran's file as her pretext. The receptionist did not check. Marcus closed his office door behind her and sat down. She did not waste time. You served with Nathan Cole. He was quiet for a long beat. I can't answer that question, Chief. She waited. He spoke slowly, picking each word. But I can tell you this. If that man ever does step onto a mat, it is not Damon Vance who is gambling. It is Damon Vance who is putting his life into another person's hands. She breathed in once. Who is he? He is a man I followed across 2 oceans. That is everything I can say. She nodded. She stood up. She drove to the harbor without deciding to. She parked at the rim of the boatyard lot and watched Nathan from the cab of her cruiser. He was carrying a heavy coil of mooring rope up the gangplank of the boat he had been rebuilding for the past year. The sun was on the back of his neck. He was unaware she was there. She sat in the car for 10 minutes. She did not get out. She was facing herself. She was a sworn officer in the middle of an investigation involving this man, and she was sitting in her car watching him work. She did not have a name for what she was feeling, only that it had its own gravity. That night, at home, Nathan sat on the floor of the living room with a length of soft rope across his knee. Lily knelt across from him with her own length. He showed her a knot called the bowline. He worked it slow. Every knot has a reason, he said. Some hold tight. Some let go easy when you need them to. The trick is knowing which one to use. She tried it. The loop came out wrong. She tried it again. He guided her fingers without taking the rope from her. It was the warmest hour the house had held in weeks. Across town, Damon and his father moved the campaign forward. They filmed clips of parents who stood with Damon. They called a town council meeting on the topic of community safety. Councilman Harold opened the meeting with a speech that did not mention Nathan by name, and that mentioned him in every line. Claire sat in the public row. When Harold suggested lightly that perhaps the chief had not handled the Cole matter with appropriate decisiveness, she stood. She spoke for less than a minute. She said every complaint in her department would be investigated by the book. She said no member of the council, and no member of any council member's family, would receive special treatment from her office. She sat down. Harold smiled thinly across the room. She had just bet her career. That night, Nathan stood in front of the bathroom mirror. He pulled off his shirt, the faint scar across the left clavicle, the longer, jagged stitch line along the right side of his ribs. He looked at himself for a long time. He had promised Sarah he would never go back to that man. But if keeping that promise meant Lily watched her father be devoured, he turned off the light. In the dark, he decided. Thursday morning. 2 days before the fight, the duty phone rang on Claire's desk. The caller was a young woman. Her voice was shaking but controlled, the way someone sounds when they have been rehearsing for a week. Chief, I need to talk to you. Not over the phone. They met at a roadside coffee shop on Highway 17, outside of town. The young woman was 22 years old. She introduced herself as Hannah Reyes. 3 years ago, her face had been on the poster outside Vance Elite Martial Arts, the dojo's youngest state champion. She had stopped competing without explanation, switched schools, and disappeared from the public side of the sport. She slid a small black USB drive across the table. 2 years ago, Damon broke my arm in practice. On purpose. I had told him I didn't want to enter a tournament he wanted me in. My father took $20,000 to keep it quiet. I kept the video. I was afraid, but I saw the clip he posted about that boat mechanic, and I'm not staying quiet anymore. Claire's hand closed around the drive. Hannah was not done. She looked up. And, Chief, one more thing. Someone came to me last week, asked if I was ready to come forward. He told me his name was Marcus. Claire understood at once. Marcus had not broken his word to Nathan. He had not picked up the phone to Lejeune. But inside the room of his own conscience, he had found the only other lever long enough to move the problem. He had found a witness. He had built another way out. Claire turned that over in her head all the way back to her department. The man Nathan kept refusing to name had been working the case alongside her without saying a word. 2 strangers, 2 angles, 1 quiet decision to keep one man's daughter from losing her father. Claire drove back to her department and watched the video alone in her office with the door locked. It was clear. It was clean. It was a felony on tape. It was enough to pull Damon off the floor without ever waiting for the bell. At the same time, across town, Nathan was packing a small canvas bag at the foot of his bed. He folded a gray training shirt. He folded plain black pants. He picked up the framed photograph of Sarah from the dresser. He held it for a moment in both hands. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," he said softly. Just one more time. He laid the picture face down in the drawer. Marcus came through the front door without knocking. He set two objects on the kitchen counter, an old medal in a velvet box, a folded set of original service orders. "Sir, I found the witness. She has come forward to Chief Whitman. You don't have to fight if you don't want to." Nathan looked at the medal. He looked at Marcus. "I'm still going to fight. Sit. Not to win." So he knows he picked the wrong man. Marcus held his gaze. Then, for the first time in the whole story, he used the full rank. "Yes, Commander." That night, Claire drove to Nathan's house, not in uniform. She brought a copy of Hannah's statement in a manila folder. She laid it on the kitchen table between them. "You don't have to step on that mat tomorrow. I have enough to take him in tonight." "I know. Thank you. Why are you still going?" He looked at her a long moment. "Because you bet yourself to protect me. I can't let you be the only one standing in the open." She reached across the table. She set her hand on top of his. 3 seconds, she drew her hand back. Neither of them said anything else. Saturday morning broke clear and warm over Wilmington. By 8, cars were lined 2 deep along the curb outside Vance Elite Martial Arts. By 9, the front windows were so crowded the staff had started turning people away. Damon had called every local news station within 50 miles. 2 had sent crews. The dojo's front banner had been replaced overnight with a freshly printed sign that read "Vance versus the Dad Easy Money." Nathan drove Lily to Marcus's house first. On the front porch, he knelt down so they were at the same height. He slipped the small rope bracelet from his own wrist and tied it around hers. The knot was clean. The same one he had taught her. "I'll be home before dinner." She did not ask where he was going. She had not asked all morning. She wrapped both her arms around his neck and held him for a long count, and then let go and went inside with Marcus. Marcus met Nathan's eyes over the top of her head and gave one small nod, a promise without a word. Nathan got back in the truck. He walked into the dojo at 9:45 in a gray cotton shirt and plain black training pants and bare feet. Nothing distinguished him from any other man in any other room. Damon stood at the center of the mat in his black belt with the gold trim. He was shadowboxing, loud for the camera. He threw the stack of $5,000 onto the floor at his feet. The opening scene repeated. "You came," Damon said. "I'm surprised, Cole. I said I would. 3 minutes. First man to go down stays down. 1 minute is enough." The room laughed. Damon laughed loudest. The front door opened. Claire walked in. She was not in uniform. She had not come as a chief. She had come as a person. She took her place in the front row, next to Hannah Reyes. Damon saw Hannah's face. The grin slipped for half a second before it pulled itself back into place. He did not know that the arrest warrant was already signed, in Claire's coat pocket. It would be served the moment the fight ended, regardless of outcome. Claire wanted Damon to feel his loss on his own floor, in front of his own community, before he lost everything else. The referee, a former student of Damon's, called the start. Damon launched a high kick, the showy move he used to open every demonstration. Nathan stepped a half pace to the left. The foot whistled past his cheek by 3 inches. Damon followed with combination after combination. Nathan did not throw a single strike in the first 15 seconds. He moved. He read. He let Damon empty the bag. He was making sure every person in the room understood. It was not that Nathan could not hit back. It was that Nathan was choosing not to. At the 20-second mark, Damon lost patience. He pulled his weight back and threw a full-power right hook with everything in his body. Nathan caught his wrist with 2 fingers. The room went silent. Cameras did not move. Damon tried to pull his hand back. It would not move. He looked down at the 2 fingers holding him in place. For the first time in his adult life, he felt what every person on the other side of his fists had felt. He felt helpless. Nathan spoke softly, quiet enough that only Damon heard. "You broke a child's arm. You will never touch mine." "Helletgo." Damon stumbled back. He did not understand yet what was about to happen. The match was 20 seconds old. Damon's pride snapped in front of his own students. He came forward with a knife-hand strike aimed squarely at Nathan's collarbone. It was not the move of a man defending his title. It was the move of a man trying to break a body. The boards he had spent his life snapping were not enough. He wanted a sound out of Nathan that he could remember. Nathan had been waiting for the moment Damon stopped performing. He stepped inside the strike. He absorbed the force on the outside of his forearm. and rolled it down to Damon's elbow in a single continuous motion. It was not karate. It was not MMA. It was something else, a close-quarters technique taught only inside the gates of certain bases and inside certain doors. 12 seconds passed. In those 12 seconds, Nathan put Damon on the mat 3 times. He took a different joint each time. Each time he could have broken what he was holding. Each time he chose not to. On the third descent, he laid Damon face down and rested one knee softly across his lower back. There was no pressure in the knee. There was no need. The dojo was silent enough to hear the ceiling fans. A reporter slowly lowered her camera. A teenage student near the door whispered to her friend, "That isn't martial arts." What was that? Marcus stepped into the doorway of the dojo. He had come alone. Lily was at his house, still safe with his wife. Marcus did not speak. He raised his right hand in the precise, slow form of a military salute and held it. 2 men in the back of the crowd, men no one in Wilmington had paid close attention to, who worked at the dry dock and the marina, stood up from their folding chairs. They returned the salute. Slowly, together. It was the first time the town had seen Nathan greeted by men like that. Claire crossed the floor. She put her hand on Nathan's shoulder. Enough. He released Damon and stepped back. Damon did not get up. He was not seriously hurt. He had simply met something he had not believed existed. Claire turned to face the room. "Damon Vance, you are under arrest for the felony assault of Hannah Reyes 3 years ago. Additional charges are pending." 2 uniformed officers stepped forward. The Miranda warning began. Councilman Harold Vance stood up from his front row seat and started forward, his face dark. Claire turned and handed him a second sealed envelope. The summons to an ethics hearing for interference in an active investigation. The whispering in the room rose like surf. As they walked Damon to the cruiser, he turned his head back over his shoulder one last time. He looked at Nathan. He asked the only honest question of his adult life. "Who are you?" Nathan answered him with 4 words. "I am a father." The reporters surged. Microphones came up. A camera light hit his face. He looked at none of them. He walked past every one of them, out the door, and into the cool morning air of the parking lot. He got in his truck. He sat with both hands on the wheel for a moment, breathing. Then he turned the key. He drove to Marcus's house. When the door opened, Lily was running before her feet had landed. He caught her under the arms and lifted her. She pressed her cheek to his neck. "You came home early, Dad. I kept my promise." It was the only victory he was willing to claim. A week later, Wilmington woke up as a different town. Vance Elite Martial Arts was sealed pending the state investigation. Councilman Harold Vance resigned ahead of his ethics hearing, citing private family reasons. The local paper ran Hannah Reyes' story across 2 full pages, bylined by a reporter who had once been a student at the dojo herself. Nathan Cole's file at the Department of the Navy was never formally unsealed. The official confirmation never came. It did not need to. The people of Wilmington had seen enough with their own eyes. At the boatyard, the men did not ask him anything. They handed him tools the way they had always handed him tools. They started bringing him coffee in the morning without making a thing out of it. The respect was quieter than before, and deeper. Lily went back to school. The girl who had given her the bruise looked at the floor when Lily passed. Lily did not look back. She did not need to. She sat at lunch with a new friend, a quiet girl from the other side of the playground, and split her sandwich. At the department, Claire filed her final report on the Vance case. On her desk afterward sat an envelope from Norfolk. Inside, an invitation to the Silver Star ceremony for Lieutenant Commander Nathan Cole. A handwritten line at the bottom read "Family Welcome." She did not know how it had reached her desk. She had a guess. She slid it into her coat pocket. Late that afternoon, she drove to the harbor. Nathan was on the deck of a small refurbished sailboat at the end of Pier 4. He had been rebuilding her for almost a year, in the hours after the yard closed. She had a fresh coat of marine paint along her hull. A name had been stenciled across her transom in clean white letters, Sarah. He had not put the brush to those letters until last week. Lily sat at the bow, legs swinging over the side, a length of rope across her lap. Claire stopped at the gangplank. She held the envelope out. He read it. He looked up at her. "Would you come with us?" Claire did not answer right away. She looked out at the water. The harbor was the color of old steel under the autumn light. After a moment, she said, "I think I should." From the bow, Lily called down, "Miss Claire, do you know how to tie knots?" "No, sweetheart. I don't. I will teach you. My dad taught me." Claire stepped onto the boat. She climbed forward and sat down on the deck beside the little girl. Lily put a length of rope in her hands and began to show her, in the slow, careful voice of a teacher who had only learned it last week. Nathan stood behind them on the deck, his hands loose at his sides, the sun in his eyes. He watched. He did not speak. The light held the three of them on a small boat in a quiet harbor, and no one said anything about the past. He smiled, just the corner of his mouth. It was a small thing. It was the smallest smile a man could make. It was also the first one in 3 years that he had not had to ask himself for. It was just there, just enough. 2 months later, Norfolk, Virginia, the base auditorium. Late morning sun came through tall windows along the eastern wall. Nathan wore the uniform for the first time in 4 years. On the left of his chest, the ribbons and the medals, every one of them, every piece he had spent the past years putting in a drawer. In the family row sat Lily in a simple white dress, the small rope bracelet around her wrist. Beside her sat Claire, not in Chief's blacks, but in a plain navy dress. Marcus stood in the honor row, at attention, eyes forward. The Admiral read the citation. It was short. Several phrases were redacted, blacked out where the operation was still sealed. The room came to its feet and clapped. Lily looked up at her father. Her eyes were not surprised. They were not the wide eyes of a child suddenly told a secret. She had always known the shape of who he was. Today, she had a name for it. Afterward, in the corridor outside the auditorium, Nathan found Claire. They stood beside each other against a wide marble pillar, not quite touching. "Thank you for coming. I said I would." The silence after that was longer than the words. He reached up and lifted a loose strand of hair from the shoulder of her dress. He did it slowly, the way a man unties a small knot. She did not move. He let his hand fall. Lily came running. She caught one of his hands in one of Claire's and tugged. "I'm hungry." They walked out of the building together. They did not hurry. They did not say anything about what came next. Wilmington was waiting for them, north along the coast. Life was not going to fold back into the shape it had been. It was going to move forward into something new. A morning, weeks later, the small sailboat at her mooring in Wilmington Harbor. On the cabin shelf, 3 short lengths of rope had been tied into 3 different knots. One was Nathan's, one was Lily's. The third was not finished yet. Lily's small hand was guiding Claire's hand through it. Slow. A voice came over the picture without ceremony. Nathan's voice. He did not say much. Sarah used to say a good knot is one that holds tight when you need it, and lets go clean when it is time. I held mine too long. I am learning how to hold something new. A single shortcut. A federal visiting room. Damon Vance sat on one side of a table, in pale prison khaki. Across from him sat a former student of his. The young man spoke without anger and without pity. "You were never the strongest man in the room. You were just the loudest." Damon had no answer for that. He looked at the table. He looked at the door. He looked at nothing in particular. The minute the visit ended, he would walk back to a small cell with a bed and a sink and the rest of his life to think about what the young man had just said to him. The last shot was of Wilmington from high above the water. The harbor. The small sailboat in its slip. 3 small figures on its deck. The line of the sun on the autumn ocean. The thin white wake of a fishing boat heading out for the day. A gull rising. Wilmington going about itself, the way small towns do, with the people inside it changed and the place itself unchanged. Fade out.